I always quote Ruth Fine, who said, "The price of a work of art does not reflect its value."
This is Platemark. My name is Ann Shafer, and I am your host. You've reached us at Series 3 of Platemark, in which I'm interviewing the wonderful people who occupy the print ecosystem. Today's guest is Laura Einstein. She is the manager of the gallery at the Met Store, which is housed within the Metropolitan Museum of Art's bookstore as you go into the lobby. It's on the right. So when you go in, if you take the stairs at the back corner up to the mezzanine level, you'll find Laura and her 3,000 square foot space in which she is selling limited edition fine art prints by a range of artists. I wanted to talk to her about being a retail operation within a museum, but selling art, not, books and scarves and mugs, and to ask her about the publishing work that they do for the Met and where does the money go when she sells out an edition of prints that she has published. I'm excited for you to get to know her today. I think it's a great conversation, and we'll get rolling in a sec. But before we do, I always want to establish my positionality. It's only right. I identify as a cishet white woman, and I use the pronouns she, her. I record Platemark in Baltimore, Maryland, the land of the Piscataway Conoy people. Any images that Laura and I talk about will be available over on the show notes at platemarkpodcast.com. Also over on the website, platemarkpodcast.com, is a support and donate button. You can support our good work here at Platemark. Buckle up and here we go. Hey, Laura, it's great to see you. Thank you for coming on Platemark.
Oh, well, Anne, I am so honored that you asked me to join you on Platemark. What a great podcast series you have. And I just have been enthralled, absolutely. Tom, Huck, and True. It was like I was taking an art history course with you, a printmaking course, and they were just riffing, and it's Ghent, not gent, and, riffing on 16th century, the dates. True had those dates down, and what Huck is doing, referencing the symbolism and the predella and the this and the, oh my God, it was so rich. You've just done such a great job. And your voice and your diction the way
thanks.
you did is so fantastic. So I am truly honored.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure. We're new friends, but I'm so glad you found me when I was wandering around New York this year at the print fairs, because I feel like we're kismet peoples, like we have this thing. But before of course, can you introduce yourself for our listeners?
I am Laura Einstein, and I am manager of the gallery at the Met Store at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, a gallery, a 3,000-foot gallery that's been there since the 70s, and I'm the third one to run it. And it's such a treasure. There are so few museums, maybe 2 or 3, that have this type of thing. I think the Baltimore Museum had one, or a rental program. That's how my parents built their collection of sorts. At the Canton Art Institute, they had a rental program. So it's a hidden treasure, and I'm really trying to change that. It was one of my favorite spots in the museum. Over the years, I would always go up to the gallery and see what was going on, who was being featured, what prints were out, and would buy prints there. So I am very honored and grateful to lead it.
Let's back up for people and describe what's going on. So there's a store on the mezzanine level above the main shop as you are in the main lobby of the Metropolitan Museum on Fifth Avenue. And if you go upstairs inside the shop, there's a gallery where you can buy limited edition fine art prints that you have selected for sale.
99% of the time, they're in the Met's collection, the artists that I select. If there's an exhibition or something that's relevant, like Jimmy Grashow, I brought him in because he's not in the Met's collection, but he did record covers. He did Jethro Tull. He did the Yardbirds. So he started crying when he went into the shop, and I had his work in the balcony lounge, and that work just popped. And then I brought his monkeys in. So I had a whole crazy group of monkey sculptures that were made out of cardboard. He said cardboard is just dying to not be thought of as trash. So he was He did the whole Trevi Fountain in cardboard, and he let it degrade at the Aldridge in Ridgefield. So he was represented by Alan Stone, and when Alan Stone passed away, he went out to the studio to pay his respects, and he saw his sculptures chained to trees, just degrading in the backyard, and he was so upset because his work can be funny or lighthearted, but it's to be taken seriously, certainly. And he just said, ashes to ashes, mush to mush. And he actually did a lot of soul searching and thought, I'll put it outside at the Aldrich and just let it fall apart, turn to
Brilliant.
mush.
That's brilliant, really.
He's a wonderful artist and happily a very good friend.
Oh, nice.
So the gallery, I consider it like a Napoleon, the pastry. So you have the main shop on the first floor, another shop on the second floor, and I'm right in the middle. If you look up, and everyone says, where are the carpets? Because I don't sell carpets anymore. Michael Haladky, my predecessor, sold carpets.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah. And he also sold posters, and I don't sell posters anymore. And I'm careful about that because I find daily that I'm describing what a print is. And people will come up and say, are the works signed? And I say, yes, they're signed. And well, we'll get into this in a second, but I thought of calling the talk, if you have a theme, I've already given it a theme, plates, prints, and people, colon, the gallery at the Met store. Uh, and I worked at Yale with the editor, and she said curators are always suffering from colonitis.
That's the truth.
And I think that's so funny,
Yeah.
Da da da, colon, and then an explanation.
Yes,
So
the
anyway,
discussions of exhibition titles at the museum were always, is this the pre-colon or the post-colon part of the title? It was endless titles with colons.
yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
love vinyl lettering.
Oh, we're all
Little
museum
vinyl lettering
geeks.
make an exhibition just so sexy, snazzy. So, I just love vinyl lettering.
Oh, that's hilarious. So I'm gonna true confessions time. I grew up in Connecticut, and the
Where in
Met.
Connecticut?
Well, we lived in we were talking before we started rolling about New Canaan and the Philip Johnson house where you were a tour guide for a long time. We were in
An
New Canaan.
educator.
Excuse me, an educator. We were in New Canaan for a hot second, but then we moved to Westport. So I basically grew up in Westport. And the Met was my mom was a painter. So the Met was our home museum. That's where we went. And we would drive in our VW bus, down the West Side
Oh,
Highway,
I always love VW buses.
and we'd park in the garage underneath, and we'd spend the day at the Met. And that was where we went. And I didn't know there was a gallery at the Met store.
My parents came to visit me for Thanksgiving, and they said, oh, my daughter works in the Mezzanine Gallery. We're here to see her. And they sent the guards sent her up to the American wing. Sent my and I'm like, it's just even within the museum, but I am really working to change that. And, with the rebranding, with the gallery on the website, with lots of events. So that's a work in process. It'll be nice once we get the database up so you can see it remotely, what I have in the gallery. So, yeah. So you would go to the Met often and didn't even know? Yeah.
No, and in my defense, I wasn't a print person until much later. So that's my defense.
Well, print people, I've taken print people also who didn't know it was there. So I'm not sure why, but it's been there since the 70s. And down below, you see it was the disco era where you see mirrors in the ceiling
The big brass stairwell railings and everything. Yes, it
and the
is.
mirrors on the
Mhm.
side. Yeah. All of a
Yeah.
sudden, I'm thinking of the Eagles song, Pink Champagne on Ice. Yeah.
I think listeners probably have heard me say that the Baltimore Museum had a sales and rental gallery, same sort of function as the Met store, but it got shuttered long ago. But that so many people in Baltimore will tell me when I was a curator at the museum that that was how they started collecting, that was their very first work of art was purchased at the Baltimore Museum's sales and rental gallery, which I'm sure you have the same experience in New York. Like it's such a perfect way to get into collecting.
Oh, it's fantastic. My son brought his best friend in, and I have a beautiful work by Jane Dixon. So he was able to buy a print from me. I gave him a bit of a discount, and he got a beautiful work of art, a Jane Dixon. And she was in the Whitney Biennial this past year, and she has a one person exhibition coming up in Europe. It's so nice when you see, I mean, she's consistently been a wonderful artist, but it's nice when you see that artists drop off the tip of your tongue at certain times and are seen everywhere. So I am so proud to be able to sell Eddie, my son's best friend, a beautiful work of art with a documentation sheet at a price. Everyone has their different, what they consider affordable. And I always quote Ruth Fine, who said, "The price of a work of art does not reflect its value."
Indeed.
And I repeat that again and again because prints are less expensive because you can make more than one, but the intentionality and the physicality is there. Many painters are printmakers themselves. One technique informs the other. Bill Jacklin, who I brought in, and I sold quite a number of his pieces. He's a Royal Academician, and he paints and prints at the same time. He goes back one to the other. And I really try to take the mystique away from printmaking, and I want people to find it accessible. I love listening to people when they're at the museum, their comments when they're walking around. I heard somebody once in the Van Gogh exhibition say, "Van Gogh's road is rather naive, don't you think?" And I thought, what? Oh, one day I heard these high school kids, they were on the first floor of the museum at 11 o'clock in the morning. They said, "Well, we've covered the first floor." Or,
Oh.
and I thought, whoa, that's like visit the Chevy Chase, doing the Louvre in 20 minutes.
Oh my
Well,
gosh.
Nadine Orenstein, who's head of the drawings and prints department, has been very supportive of the gallery. She refers to it as a wonderful place to purchase works of art that have relevance to the museum and or works of art from artists in the collection, and the funds from it support the museum. So how good is that?
Yeah,
I mean,
how does that work? The sales of the prints go into an acquisition fund directly, or is it more
uh,
dispersed?
actually, we are selling a strike of a Homer print. It was done posthumously, and funds from that go to drawings and prints. But I either take work on consignment or I purchase it directly. And then I have an agreement with the artist, the vendor, and then I pay them. The rest of the funds, according to our agreement, goes to the museum.
Huh.
So, and I actually prefer to consign because I can do turnover. And, sometimes when you buy outright, you might have something for quite a while. But if I buy it outright, I mean, it's safe to say whenever I bring a work of art in, I'm sure it will sell.
That
you
is
know,
your job, right?
it's my job. Well, I bring something in that you don't know.
Well, so
Well,
how do you decide who and what to bring in? That must, I mean, that's a big job there, right there.
oh, well, that's been one of the most gratifying parts of what I'm doing now. I've been in the gallery for the past 4 years. It's my fourth time at the Met. I love going to artist studios. I could look at art 24/7. I read exhibition catalogs. Yes, I do. I network. I said to Chuck Webster, I said, "Gosh, I've really been trying to get in touch with Tony Fitzpatrick." He said, "Oh, I've got his number on my cell phone. He called Tony. Tony answered my call, and bam, it was kismet. And Tony, like you, he has been such a shining star for me and the people that I bring in. I have such joy to see them there. Tom Huck, I met him years ago, and it makes it so much easier to sell a work of art from artists that you feel connected to. I'm a storyteller as well, the anecdotes. Bob Parker's in the Met's collection. He came to his opening, and he's the picture. He and I are there on the website, and you can't see in that sweater, but he's got a hole in his sweater, and he still plays the drums in a jazz band, his own jazz band. 4 of his boys are drummers. He was the artist for Lust for Life. He was Kirk Douglas. He was the artist for Van Gogh in that movie years ago in the 50s. So all of these stories, and the more you talk to the artist or visit or meet their friends. Dan Rizzi came up one day with his wife, and he was having a bit of a blue day. And he walks up the stairs, and I said, "Hi, I'm Laura Einstein." He said, "I'm Dan Rizzi." I said, "Dan Rizzi, I love your work. I saw your work at Tandem with Paula. I wanted to buy it. This, I'm going to buy it one day." And it just sparked something. And I said, "We've got to get you in." He said, "Yes, I'd love to be here." And I said, "We're reopening the gallery. Would you like to be the artist I reopen with?" He said, "Oh, that'd be great. How about if I bring in my friend Roseanne Cash and we'll do a book signing?" And I said, "Oh my God, we need a seatbelt." Yes, this is great. So I am very proud of who I have in the gallery and more to come. I'm reporting now to a fellow who had a great career at Target. And his specialty is inventory as well as selling and all sorts of, because I'm in the retail area. So down below, they're selling merchandise while I'm selling art. And in the past, a reasonable work of art for me, I I said to him, "JC, was $600. That seemed to be a reasonable price point." He said, "Well, take it down, take it down, take it down." Well, lo and behold, Esther K. Smith and Dicko Faust of Purgatory Pie Press, they've got works of art for $10 all the way up to thousands. And how great is that? And Nadine said, inherently, printmaking was meant to be democratic. So again, the price of a work of art does not reflect its value. And some of the Society of American Graphic Artists are in the museum's collection, like Bruce Waldman and a number of others. And it also reflected an exhibition that was done in the 1950s. So it's honoring that prior exhibition in the 1950s. There's that relevance to the museum and bringing in printmaking at more affordable prices by artists who are in the collection, are not in the collection, but have a very strong history. You have to be accepted into the Society of American Graphic Artists. Deanne Prozia, who's the president of Saga, was talking to Tony Fitzpatrick. He said, "I want to be a member of Saga." She said, "Well, you have to apply." So what I decide to bring in is networking, is looking around. I've come to know Phil Sanders, who's wonderful, and brought in, made sure his book was restocked, and I'm getting Chakaya Booker from him. And David Crute, I'll be working with him on bringing in William Kentridge. So just like I said before, paying attention to women artists, bringing in Audrey Flack. Jane Hammond is wonderful. And there are many. Swoon, I brought in Swoon, and she gave me her Idaphones, which was based on music and sound. And I had wanted to do a print publication with her, and we were going to do it with Paula at Tandem Press. And she was going to do a print related to when we got the Leonardo da Vinci a few years ago. But then timing and COVID, ultimately, she thought of an installation by the Nakashima Furniture and put her idophones there. Just seeing what's out there, meeting the artists, seeing how we can work something in, how thematically, how it makes sense. I am a curator by training, but am, I don't know, do we like the word gallerist? It sounds so highfalutin or something, a gallerist. I'm a retailer, but I believe in what I'm selling. I'm sitting in front of Hopeful here. Charlie Hewitt is so great, and I sell his Traveler publication that was done with him years ago. I frame it, I sell it. I frame it, I sell it. It's a
Mm,
beautiful woodcut going through the press 12 times or so on Japanese paper, but I sell it over and again. The minute I have it framed, I sell it framed. So, and it's $800, a beautiful print. I sold it to my sister. So my sister just came in and bought some work. I said, Robin, there's no way you're going to buy art that's not good. You can't, and actually, my parents early on rented a Calder and a Dine from the Canton Art Institute, which is now the Canton Art Museum.
right.
So, but yeah.
Well, I have a question sort of about the process behind the scenes. Where do you get things framed, and how easy is it? And then I do want to circle to you as a publisher for sure.
Yeah, sure. We also do framing. So I don't sell posters anymore. I don't sell carpets. I can't speak to carpets. Why have something you can't speak to? That's pretty, isn't it? I prefer not to do that. So if somebody wants a poster framed, we send it local and we charge for framing. That's a revenue source for me, framing. If it's a work of art, then we send it up to PSG in Boston. And that's been a long standing relationship with David Marks. And so we send it up to PSG, and that's another source of revenue. Always looking for ways to bring in revenue without overtaxing, for lack of a better word, the client, the customer. I deal a lot with the trustees, the patrons, members, certainly. So whenever I'm considering what to bring in and my consignment or purchase, I'm all about margin now and ROIs. And, if I have an event, what's the ROI? Which, all these acronyms, the return on investment. What's
Right.
my return on investment going to be? So, without insulting the artist or, the customer, I always try to tip my hat to that while bringing in some revenue. And I have certain expectations of revenue I am to bring in.
Right.
I try to meet that.
Nadine Ornstein is the head of the drawing and print department, and she's got lots of people under her. In Baltimore at the museum, we had a support group for the department that were the area's collectors.
Listening committee.
Right. But in New York, I mean, your audience is so vastly different than Baltimore. I mean, I depend on the members of the Print Drawing and Photograph Society to be the bulk of the people who will come to the Baltimore Fine Art Print Fair, right?
Ah,
But in New York, it's like, you know, you throw it to the wind. Does Nadine have a support group, and do you work with
we
them?
just have a visiting committee group. And actually, I will tell you about my love, Janice Orsman. Have you ever met Janice
I have
Orsman?
not.
I will introduce you to her. And if you ever do a visit, she's got the most incredible collection of prints. And she's a Smith graduate, so she's been instrumental in Smith's collection and costumes, as well as been a great friend of Nadine and the Department of Drawings and Prints. And I think she's co chair now of the visiting committee. But Janice and I met years ago. We're both members of the Cosmopolitan Club, and we were on the art committee. Mary Ryan was head of the art committee at the time, and I met Mary, and Connie McPhee was on the art committee. Great to meet them. And so Janice and I became casual friends. And then she was doing an exhibition for IPCNY, which is now PCNY, I think. And she was doing an exhibition on monotype monoprints. So at the time, I was executive director of the Center for Contemporary Printmaking. So I said, Janice, come out and make a monotype. So she did. And then I was leaving CCP, and she and I were talking, and she said, oh, you're right. Would you like to write the introduction to Singular and Serial, which I'm writing with Catherine Kernan, and it's about the difference between monotype and monoprint.
Oh,
Writing, well, they're separate categories. So I said, sure, I'd love to. So I spent a year and a half or so writing the introduction, and I sent it to Jane Glaubinger. I sent it to Joan Petterdy, the widow of Gabor Petterdy. I think I sent it to Dick Field and talked to him about it. So I just didn't want to make any mistakes, certainly in print. But that led to Janice said, Michael Hladky is retiring at the Met. Get in there.
ah,
So I met Michael, and then I met the head of retail, and then I was offered the position before I filled out an application.
oh,
Well, hallelujah, knock on wood.
all right.
And so I had to hop, skip, and jump and find an apartment. So I had visited Judith Solotkin before, and I love Judith. She's my neighbor. I could look into her studio from my bedroom. So I'm way up here in the Bronx. Uh, but I have Janice to thank for, and you must meet Janice. She would be wonderful to do a podcast with.
Oh, okay.
Uh, she's been a very dear, loyal friend, and I am ever grateful to her for just suggesting the gallery to me, a place that I've always loved, and to just be at the helm of it. I'm just very, very, very proud and very happy and content to be there.
I think what your current position points to, which listeners may not have considered, is that there are lots of people like you of our generation that are no longer in our curatorial roles at institutions, but that there is, if you're lucky and smart and get it done, a way to continue in the world just in a different aspect, but you're still contributing to what I like to call the print ecosystem. So that's part of why I wanted to talk to you, because there are different ways of participating and being, a promoter and cheerleader for prints, and you are a perfect
Right.
example of that.
Well, and honestly, there's a certain term for people who have left curatorial, and I will find it out for you. But I worked at Yale Art Gallery as a curator of Asian art, which was the foundation of my love for prints. I kept the prints in the drawings and prints department and became very good friends with Dick Field and Lisa Hodermarsky. And in fact, Williams, who's at the McNay, head of drawings and prints, he and I used to commute in together and hit the bar car on a Friday. And because I commuted from Manhattan for 4 years, but Lyle and I became very good friends. I have an MA in 17th century Chinese painting. I have a master's. I loved working at Yale for 10 years. When you needed something done, you just walked across the hall and had it done, Whereas at the Met, if you need a light bulb changed, you call a lamper. If you're having trouble with your air conditioning, you call the HVAC people. It's like a big world, a big city. I left Yale, raised my kids, divorced, and started my own business. Academia, I didn't. It used to be that if you were in a position long enough, you just rose and developed, and you could be director of a department just by nature that you were there for 30 years or so. You were an icon, but I had no desire to go back for a doctorate. I was very happy to end my graduate career when I did. They were happy that I did too. We just parted nicely. Anyway, so there I am at Yale. I leave, start my own business. People like us, I am very happy to be a retailer because I believe in what I'm selling. I believe in the value. I think art and the humanities make us a more humane people.
Mm.
I believe that art has given me, as I said, I can look at art 24/7. I can talk about art 24/7, which might bore my kids to death. No, I, I have a lot of friends who are artists, and just that conversation about art, the language of art, makes me so happy. Being able to write about art in a coherent, cohesive manner makes me very happy. So it's a craft that gets better the more you do it. What I do now is based on relationships, it's based on writing, it's based on being able to speak coherently, to tell stories, to draw people in, to be democratic, to have somebody walk up the steps of the gallery and to have them feel like it's an intimate environment, that I'll pay attention to them directly, that I actually am enjoying finding out what they like, what they're interested in, even though they might not be able to articulate it. I very much believe in what I'm doing. And happily, I've been able to stay in a field that allows me to be back at the museum, back at the Met. I can't say enough how grateful I am. So it's the relationships, it's building the relationships. I want people to come in, kids to come in. And I have a great picture of Tom Huck talking to a kid about his artwork, and that's a future collector. Maybe he'll say in his 20s or 30s, God, I had such a great visit at the Met. This guy, Huck, talked to me about his prints, and I'd like to develop a print collection. You know, my son bringing his best friend in to buy something from me has been wonderful. Selling to my sisters, selling to friends, my nieces and nephews, helping them build perhaps a collection. My nephew and I, Alec and Joey and Maddie, Alec in particular, we gallery hop together, and he lives in LA. And when he comes to New York, he and Aunt Laura go gallery hopping. So I like for people to feel that mystique about printmaking. Come on, let's have a conversation.
Does the inventory go back in time?
I do have Petterdies, and I actually curated an exhibition for Gabor Petterdy, and I'm very good friends with his widow. And I actually wrote about Gabor's hands, and Joan liked it so much that she gave me a drawing that Gabor did of his hands. I've got it right there.
Oh gosh.
So I did bring in Gabor Petterdy and Charles Spurrier, who I have in now. He was Gabor's assistant at Yale in the art department. So I've never met Gabor, but she lives in Norwalk, and I would regularly visit Joan. And at one point, she was on the board of the Center for Contemporary Printmaking. And I was on the board there for 6 years. I replaced a fellow who had been the head of the gallery, Michael, for 30 years. So when he left, and of course, retailers look at inventory and they compare it to what your sales are. And I had a lot of inventory, and I had to do a lot of RTVs, which stands for return to vendor.
Mm.
But it happened around COVID, and actually it was a good thing. Explaining to a vendor, many of them who have given us a lot of art, explaining that I am returning this to you now, but in the future, I will come back to you and be very judicious about what I bring in, and I'll keep it for a more limited period of time so that I can have a better turnover and so that I'm not sitting on works of art, because these are works on paper too. If you're sitting on a work on paper, you run the risk of having it damaged. Not to mention, keeping the inventory coming and going is a better idea for me, keeping the inventory lower and having a turnover. But I do have, and I'd like to bring back in Bruce Waldman, and I do have, and in fact, Leonard Baskin, Swoon had always admired the work of Leonard Baskin. So I surprised her and put his work up next to her idophones. And she was thrilled to see that, because it's nice to know who the foundation, who you were looking at. I did two publications with George Condo, which was an absolute thrill. The first publication I did with him sold out in 10 days.
Oh my gosh.
Renaissance musicians, and then I did a second one, a Midwinter's Daydream. When I started, I thought, boy, I'd love to work with George Condo. And so I reached out a couple times, and so it happened. He came to the opening, and he had a dinner to go to at his gallery at the time. And he said to me, "Oh, but I had so much more fun at the Met in the gallery." But it's fun when you connect like that, or when they see you're treating their work well and getting them notice and speaking well of it. So I think it's an overall cohesive, from artist to printer to client to customer to the Met. I was told that in my running the gallery that I'm carrying on the mission of the museum, and you
Yeah.
can't get higher praise than that. I got
Mhm.
heard that from Stephen Manello, who is the head of retail. He comes from Ralph Lauren, and he's a wonderful man to work with, so I have a lot of respect for him. Very ethical, holds his head high in all circumstances. It took us 2.5 years to do the 150th print portfolio, which involved 12 artists and essays. And Gemini printed 10 of the 12. And then Andre Riboli printed Gabriela Roscoe, and Leslie Miller printed Via Selmans. And then Gemini did the rest. Jasper Johns, Ed Ruscha. So that was 2.5 years in the making, and sold during COVID, 60,000 per portfolio, and brought in a couple million to the museum. So that was very gratifying to have that. Actually, when people buy works of art, I get asked every so often, will it appreciate in value? And I say, I'm not a Svengali. I cannot tell you. If I had those powers, my goodness,
Right.
I say, rather than thinking about whether it will appreciate in value or not, think about whether you have that aha moment when you're looking at it, whether it's making you happy, whether you have a visceral connection to it. There's only one piece or two, maybe, pieces in my collection that haven't stood the test of time. And it's been great for me. My son and my daughter, I said when they both moved into their apartments, select what you want. And actually, my son hung his himself. And I said, stay in your lane, buddy. The hanging and I do the installing, but it's nice. They both appreciate art. So it gives them a lot of pride too.
When it came to the 150th portfolio for the Metropolitan's anniversary, were you on your own? Were you allowed to say, I'm going to invite Wangechi and
Oh no, the invitations went out through Max and the curators of the departments, and the co-publisher was Sharon Copland Horowitz. Uh, so I was working with Sharon and Jennifer and Stephen Manello. We were a team to bring it together, but the curators were asked who they thought, like Sue Bing. And I was struck by Russell and Paula saying that they gave Sue Bing his first exhibition at the Chazen. Oh, and through them, I brought in Judy Pfaff, and I had Judy Pfaff in the gallery, and she's just wonderful. And she was good friends with Jane Hammond, so I had them installed at the same time. I think that's where I draw on my curatorial background,
sure?
is seeing thematically what works together. And when I installed Jane Dixon's, yeah, and in fact, just yesterday, Stephen, I took down some frame posters to him for retail. Their office is down by the Eurocenter. And I said, either I'll hang these for you, or Buster and David will. He said, well, don't we have to get the carpenters or the installers? I said, if that was the case, I'd be out of a position, because I hang it all generally myself, or at times I'll have somebody help me. But But I now have Kaylee Jacobson back with me, and we've done a staggered schedule, but I'm always there by appointment, or if somebody wants to come up and we're not open that day, I'll take the stanchion down and come on up. I rarely turn anyone away because you never know who's going to buy. But we're open now Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We're closed Monday and Wednesday.
Fair enough. If I'm a young artist, or if I have young, asking for a friend, if I have young friends who are artists, how is it best to approach you about getting their prints into the store system?
Yeah. Well, and I'm happy that you have introduced me to a couple people. I like to say 99% of the time they need to be in the collection. I am never able, and at times artists have approached me to get into the Met's collection,
Mm,
which I have no input on that at all. Zero, none, zero. I had an issue with that once, right? When
I
I
bet.
started the gallery, I had somebody who had been a long standing friend of mine, but she just went rogue and took work to the department. And so it was mortifying for me. I have to be very, very careful.
Okay, that's good to clarify for people. So you're not getting to the curators in the Department of Drawings and Prints through my friend Laura Einstein.
Absolutely not.
Okay. Good to know. I mean, I think that's fair. People, people try all sorts of ways to get in, but you have to, Nadine and Jennifer have to decide, and Connie, and whoever is deciding
I
things
don't.
in the contemporary realm. They have to. It's their job to find you, really,
Yes,
right?
right. And they've been very generous with me, and I consider them colleagues. They come to the gallery. At times they might purchase something from me, but it's been a very nice relationship, and we respectfully acknowledge the separation. I worked very well with Jennifer with the print portfolio, and it's been a very nice relationship.
I
I'm
think it's
grateful
great.
for.
Well, and they're lucky to have you, really. I mean, it's not only does it have an incredible storied history, but it's so great for the print world to have a resource like you in New York City, because I mean, there are print galleries obviously, but they don't always have print shows up, and it's great to be able to walk into the Met and have a go at all these wonderful things you've got brought in.
One of them said the museum was lucky to have me. For that, I'm very grateful. They trust me, and I trust them, and it's so.
That's great. Well, yeah. So, aside from the portfolio in which you were working with the curators and other people, you have published individual things, and you've used people like Greg Burnett to be the printer, the contract
And
printer.
Andrew Mockler and Peter Pettengill and a number of
Right.
others.
So, how do you just say, "Hey, I'm going to publish something"? I mean, how does that work?
Well, I asked the artist if they'd like to publish with me. And when you publish, generally, I pay the cost to make the print publication. In some instances, the artist has, but it's considered a profit share. Generally, I pay, and then once the work sells, it has a stamp on it, the gallery, and it has a documentation sheet from the gallery. So once you've recouped the cost to sell it, I start to pay the artist. Number one in the edition always goes to the Department of Drawings and Prints. So number one of the condo, both of them went to drawings and prints. Number one of the Chuck Webster went to drawings and prints. And there are others that I have one very exciting that's coming up soon, which I will tell you at some point. Knock on wood. The print portfolio, working with Gemini on that, I have a beautiful photograph of the block that Via Selman's worked on. It's like this. It's so small, but it's such a joy to see the block that it comes from. And even going up to Peter Pettengill's in New Hampshire to see the etching plate and hear Chuck Webster, that area needs to be brought up yellow. That needs to be an egg yolk yellow. This needs to be struck out. He's agreed to give that plate to drawings and prints. So
Oh, nice.
what it's so wonderful when you visit the printer and see the actual plate that it emanates from. Isn't that just a joy?
Hmm. For sure.
So,
I love a plate.
yeah.
And many museums won't acquire them. I don't exactly know why, but I was always an advocate for acquiring the plates because what better way to tell the story of the making of the thing, right?
Yeah. So, and it helps you understand it. And I'm not a printmaker. Are you a printmaker?
No, I help True print in his shop. I'm the extra pair of hands, so I'm
Oh,
learning, but I'm not a creator myself. No.
yeah. So, can I turn the tables and ask you a few questions?
Oh, sure. But I just before we leave, before we leave the publishing thing, do you have to get permission from anybody up in the stratosphere at the Met to say pull the trigger on George Condo or something?
Well, it is a conversation in that I am spending money from retail to do this. If I make a case to publish with an artist and I believe that the ROI, return on investment, will be a good one, then I generally can do it.
Okay.
But I will say I do have inventory of publications that continue to sell, like the Charlie Hewitt. It's a beautiful publication. It was done years ago, and I continue to sell it. A publication doesn't have to sell out in 10 days, it can sell over time.
Right.
And even though it doesn't sell out, you're bringing in revenue. And once you've recouped the costs, there are some that I'm already paying the artist because we've sold enough that now the artist gets paid as well.
Right. It's a long game, really.
It's a long game. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's a long game. And, whereas if you're selling merch, you sell that shirt, it's gone. Well, it's the long game for prints and publications. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, your turn.
Okay. So tell me about your career at Baltimore and the print fair and your wonderful advocacy of printmakers
Oh
and your
gosh.
network. So that's a loaded question.
Well,
I want to give
I've
to you and your incredible expertise, and you are just such a treasure. So,
oh gosh, thanks, Laura. Yeah, I backed into Prince. I've said this many a time. I was heading for American paintings as a graduate student and
you
landed
went
at the.
to
I went to Williams. Yes. Yep.
art school to get into.
Oh,
Congratulations.
thank you, thank you. It all worked out. Yeah, so I backed into Prince through working at the National Gallery and their Old Master Prince. Was I in that? No, I was in Old Master Drawings, but everything was together, and so I was the cataloger, and I kind of backed in that way. And when I got to Baltimore, because it's such a smaller department, you had much more freedom to do a little bit of everything.
Right. Wear many
In-
hats.
right, including at the National Gallery, I did that thing, and I never did anything else. And in Baltimore, one of the things that I took on, which I had never done before, was the teaching in the study room. And that's where I met True and started working with him on his history of Prince class. And boy, what an education. I mean, there's nobody better to teach it, which is why we're doing the series of history of Prince, because I felt like once he stopped teaching it at Micah, it had to be, we had to get it on tape. So it's ongoing. But anyway, that's where I really learned everything, was just soaking up everything that came out of his mouth.
Yeah. But you also you studied Hayter, didn't you?
Well, that happened at the Baltimore Museum as well. Like, it was funny enough, not a hater that spurred the whole thing. My colleague Rena Hoisington purchased a Nina Negri print. Argentinian artist, worked at the atelier in the early part in Paris. And I thought, oh, that's super cool. It's this strange lunar surreal landscape that looked like a skeleton of some creature. And I started digging through the boxes to see what friends it had and what kind of small exhibition could be brought together. And that started the whole thing. And I just kind of went off on Hater. And yeah, I don't know. I guess it was meant to be. I love the whole thing. I love the fact that it's multi-layered. I love the fact that it takes a team. I love the fact that it's, every moment is a decision, and it's a certain kind of brain space, and it's not for every person, but boy, once we can get you in, as Miranda Metcalf likes to say over on Hello Print Friend, my sister podcast, I love it, and I think I can help you love it, and I want to help you get there.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Right?
And what
Like
about,
that's what we're doing.
yeah, yeah. What about, I've been thinking, and we talked about this pre-interview, what about in printmaking? You can very much, the technique very much affects the subject matter.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And do you find an appreciation for those that you can really see the technique resounding through the subject matter, the imagery?
Yeah, I think that is like the extra icing on the cake when an artist is able to make those things work together in
Like
sync.
touche and lithography.
Right, like it's, if it adds to the meaning of the content, I'm all for it. Yeah, as you said with the touche and lithography, you can't get that any other way. Like not
No,
even in ink and on paper, like you can't do it. So I just love that there's so many ways to make images within this discipline, and I just love that each of those techniques draws to it a different kind of artist, and the lithography. Not that they don't all use more than one thing, but that there's like I don't know. I just love the whole thing. I just love the whole thing.
and what about the Baltimore Print Fair?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so at the as we were talking about the sales and rental gallery things that echoed what you're doing at the Metropolitan, the museum in Baltimore had one for a long time. And when it shuttered, the curators in the department started the print fair at the Baltimore Museum of Art back in 1990. It was Jay Fisher and Jan Howard, who's up at RISD. Jay is now retired. And they ran that print fair until I ran the last one in 2017. So it was it's a lot of work, as you can imagine. I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about, but it was so much fun, and it was so great to get to know all of the shops and publishers and gallerists and bring them all to Baltimore. And it was just, it's just the most fun I had on the job. I mean, it's just like it's they when they came to Baltimore, all the dealers would call it print camp because they all stayed in the same hotel. They were all at the bar at night. It's so different than their experience in New York, which is waiting for the Teamsters to get out of the way to move their stuff. So
I have
so
something. I'm going to interrupt for 2 seconds.
sure.
Susan Teller said she goes to Boston, and she said in Boston they say, "Do you have edition number 12 of such and such?" And when she goes to the McNay in Texas, they're like, "What you got for me?"
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and
Different.
right. Susan's hilarious. I actually just had a conversation with her on tape for the podcast the other day, so I'm excited to put that one forward because she's got a great background with the Associated American Artists and Sylvan Cole and all of that kind of how.
Susan Teller.
Yeah, Susan Teller,
Oh,
how.
she has a great sense of humor. I love Susan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so stay tuned for that one. But at the museum in Baltimore in 2016, we got a new director, and he, after seeing what was the situation with the 2017 print fair, he never did it again. And many of us were shifted out. I left. It was a big
Right.
changing of the guard, as always happens with new directors. It shouldn't have surprised any of us. I had planned to retire from Baltimore, so it was crushing for me. But rising from the ashes, we have somehow gotten our poop in a group to reconstitute the print fair, not under the museum's umbrella, but as a private, commercial print fair. So we're going
Oh,
into our second year this year, and it's coming up at the end of March.
oh, I'll come down for it.
Oh, I hope you do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's what's going on with the print fair. It's coming together. I'm still filling the last few booths, but by hook or by crook, we'll get it done.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot of coordination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for asking me about the print fair.
I hope you'll end this with a plug for the print fair.
Yes, of course. Yeah, the print fair is it's awesome, and it's the most fun I have in my work year for sure. And I encourage everybody to come. It's March 30th to April 2, and the website is baltimoreprintfair.com. So all of the details are there.
Oh, good.
Laura, thank you for coming on Platemark. It was great talking to you. I love getting the other aspects of the print world sort of on tape so that everyone knows that there's all of these various roles and levels and people that are supporting the whole system, and you are one of the stars.
Oh, well, thank you, Anne. This was such a joy talking to you, and I felt like I was kind of nervous. What am I going to talk about? What am I going to say? What's Anne going to? But, I am so passionate about what I do and selling original prints and being in the print world. And I'm so proud of the gallery at the Met Store and being in this space and working with such great artists and gallerists and printmakers and scholars like yourself. So it's a nice community. So thank you for inviting me into your community. And
Oh,
I'm very
sure.
happy to have been a part of this. So
Oh,
thank you. Thank you.
absolutely. And I encourage listeners to go up to the mezzanine level and the gallery
I'm,
stores up on the mezzanine at the Met in the bookshop, and you should go and see Laura.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Platemark with Laura Einstein. I hope you all will run over to the Met next time you're in New York and go up to the mezzanine level to find the gallery at the Met Store. You will find things that range from $50 up to several $1,000s. It's a wonderful gateway for new collectors, and you'll be amazed at the things you can afford. Thank you to Laura for being such a wonderful guest, and I'll always need to thank Michael Diamond for the use of his original music. Any images we talk about will be over on the show notes at platemarkpodcast.com. And also there, you can find a bunch of stuff. You can link through to the YouTube version of this episode, and you can link through to the Apple podcast version, the Spotify version, you name it, they're all there. So head on over. Hit the support and donate button and think about what our programming is worth to you. I sound like an NPR announcer. And also remember, there's a little microphone icon there. You can click it and leave me a voicemail. And please ask me a question. I dare you. All right. We will see you next time.